Sometimes even I can get wrapped up in the stonks, the profit, the money that can be associated with collecting or flipping Pokemon cards, and the business that you can create or that I'm trying to create from Pokemon cards. But it's important to reflect on why we're here in the first place. What got me into Pokemon cards from the beginning, and why do I have such a nostalgic, childlike connection to the cards, to the games, to the anime whenever I lay my eyes on it. So in this video, I thought I would let you guys know where it all started for me and how it got to where I am now, collecting all these Pokemon cards that you can see behind me. It's kind of funny, but I can credit both of my grandparents for kind of fueling the Pokemon card collecting and the Pokemon video games. When we were very, very young, my grandpa, for Christmas, I think Pokemon and the Game Boy Pocket had just come out. It was like the new hot thing for kids. And my grandpa at the time, he came for Christmas and he showed up with a Game Boy Pocket Red and a Game Boy Pocket Green, and with Pokemon Red and Pokemon Blue. And so my brother got the green Game Boy with Pokemon Blue, and I got the red Game Boy with Pokemon Red. And that is where it all started, where Pokemon began. I don't even think we had heard of Pokemon by that point. I don't think we were watching the anime by that point. That was the initial in. We played those Game Boys and those games so much. Everyone in the neighborhood also got a Game Boy and Pokemon, and we would just sit in the cul-de-sac. We had the greatest group of friends in this cul-de-sac when I was young. We all had Pokemon. We'd all play Pokemon. We'd all challenge each other to different challenges and things, like how fast we could beat the game, how fast we could level our Pokemon to level 20 in the first patch of grass. Like, there were so many different ways that we would approach starting a new playthrough to Pokemon, and the replayability of the game was just amazing for kids like us that didn't have, my parents were very young parents. They had us when they were like 18. They had me when they were about 20, and they didn't have a lot of money. So when we were, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old and Pokemon was starting to come out, they couldn't probably afford a Game Boy or that game. So my grandpa supplying that to us, and then the replayability in Pokemon, that we could utilize that same game over and over and over again, was not only probably a blessing for them because they didn't have to continuously, buy us Game Boy games, but also a blessing for us because we kind of knew, and, there were limitations to what we could ask for. If it wasn't for Christmas or our birthday, we most likely weren't going to get something that was, $40, $50, $60. When I think back now, I think about how much my parents must have spent on batteries, because I don't remember rechargeable batteries being a thing in my household. I don't remember having those. I just remember constantly having to go to the battery drawer where we had the big stacks of 20 to 30 count AAA batteries, and grabbing another 2 to throw into the old Game Boy Pocket so I could continue playing Pokemon. I also have memories of going on car rides or trips when you're riding home at night, and every time you're trying to play the game. This was before the little light came out, or at least I didn't have it at that point, and the Game Boys weren't backlit, so at night it was near impossible unless you had a flashlight to play your game. But it would be every time you pass a street light, you'd move a little further, and then you'd try and squint and see if you could get further, and then every time you pass another street light, you could move a little bit more. Yeah, I remember that vividly from playing Game Boy and playing Pokemon. I played the game so much that when you get to Dark Cave, I don't even get Flash anymore because I just don't need it. I could waltz right through Dark Cave. I don't need it. I can still get all the items. Getting Flash was don't need it. I just don't need it anymore. I've done it so many times. I think it's just muscle memory at this point. And the games is the one sort of thing that I never dropped off from. Whenever there was a new Pokemon game, I played it. I think the only generation of Pokemon game that I hadn't played until recently was 4th gen, was Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum. I definitely played Heart Gold, Soul Silver when it came out. I remember going to Target and buying it and playing it and loving it. But that other side of 4th gen, that Diamond, Pearl, Platinum, that was a section of games that I did not play. But I've played every single other Pokemon game on release because the games have just always connected to me. I think I have a more of a nostalgia connection to the games than anything else, but the cards very early on were something that was also fueled. The collectibleness of the cards and us opening packs and buying singles and stuff was something fueled actually by my grandma. Now, like I said, we didn't grow up in a household that had a lot of money, so we couldn't constantly ask for things that were expensive, but we could ask for maybe a pack of Pokemon cards here and there, or a pack of football cards here and there. And we still have a large collection of sports cards. We collected sports a lot in the late 90s, early 2000s, and unfortunately those were all printed to the ground, so that collection is basically worthless, apart from the sentimental value, obviously, that we have. When we would go to the store, I'm sure we asked for toys, I'm sure we asked for a candy bar, but I'm sure on top of that we asked for Pokemon cards or football cards. And a lot of times, those things were only $2, $3, $3, $4, and so it was easier for us to get a card than it was to get like a new game for the Game Boy, right? And this side of us, this collecting side of us, actually was perpetuated a lot by my grandmother. So every single year for our birthday, we would have a day or a weekend with grandma. And we lived really close to her back when we were kids. We were probably 10, 15 minutes away, just in one town over. And she would come pick us up, and we would hang out with her for the weekend. And most of the time, that meant going into downtown Minneapolis and going to a card store called Shinder's. And this is actually hilarious because in one of Pokemon Classic's videos, I think he was being interviewed by somebody, he talked about going to Shinder's, and that's probably the exact same store in downtown Minneapolis that we would go every single year for our birthday, was Shinder's. Unfortunately, it's no longer alive. It's no longer there. But it was a frequented place. Also, on my birthday weekend, I would always want to go to the Great Moon Buffet, which was a Chinese buffet restaurant in or around Minneapolis as well. But I didn't actually want to go there for any Chinese food. I would go there to get the sweet and sour kind of chicken nuggets, the tempura chicken, but then I wouldn't get any sauce. So my grandma, bless her soul, would pay like $20 a piece for us to go to this Chinese buffet, and I would just basically eat the chicken nuggets. But my grandma also has a pretty big sports card collection. She's big, and she's always been big into sports, big into the Vikings and the Twins and the different like big players, big name players around those teams. So she would collect a lot of sports cards and stuff. And when I was in Shinder's, I'd be looking at the Yu-Gi-Oh and the Pokemon, and I'm sure at some point she was like, "What are these stupid little creatures? Like, why isn't he looking at the Ken Griffey Jr. rookie card over there or something?" But we would always go there. We would get like a pack or maybe a couple singles or something, and it was just a lot of fun to go in there and look around. I remember, and I don't know if this is one of those like post, like it's been so long that you feel like you remember it, but maybe you actually aren't remembering it correctly. But I just remember long boxes, like just tables of long boxes, and like boxes of like $1 cards of like vintage Yu-Gi-Oh and stuff by the front, by the register. And there was just so many cards to look through. It was an amazing store. But at some point, around the Neo era, because I do have a couple of Neo holos in my personal collection, that was where it ended. There's no cards in the collection past the Neo era. I must have gone straight into sports cards because that was definitely where we transitioned to next. We went from Pokemon into sports, and we started playing sports a lot. So I think that's why it transitioned that way, where our lifestyle just changed. I was a 2 to 3 sport athlete for most of my, school years. So a lot of my interest in that time was sports. I was watching professional sports on TV. I would open sports cards and put in my collection. We kind of got away from Pokemon, except for the games. I would always still play the video games, but cards just kind of fell off a cliff for me. And the same goes for the anime. I don't feel like I have watched a lot of anime past the Kanto run, past that first kind of Kanto run through to the Elite Four. I don't think I've watched much anime after that, but I do have vivid memories. I do have vivid memories of 3 different cartoons. I have vivid memories of my brother and I coming home at 4 o'clock and watching an hour-long block, 2 episodes of Dragon Ball Z every single day. It didn't matter if it was reruns or what it was. We would sit down and we would watch Dragon Ball Z for an hour between 4 and 5 and wait for our dad to come home, to have dinner or whatever. We would just plant our asses and watch Dragon Ball Z. And then on Saturday morning on WB, it was always a 1-hour block of Pokemon first and then Yu-Gi-Oh after. So I was into all that stuff, and I would watch it every single week. I had to be there for Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh. There were a couple times between then and the pandemic, where I did get drawn in to buy a pack or two of Pokemon cards again. Definitely around Pokemon Go. Pokemon Go was insane. If you weren't like if you weren't playing Pokemon Go when it first came out, I remember we were filming a podcast. I used to do a podcast with some people that I worked with, and we were filming it. And right in the middle of filming it, Pokemon Go came out, and the second half of the podcast was literally just us playing Pokemon Go. And then after that, I think it was super late at night. I literally left the house, walked around the block catching Pokemon, and I was like, "Oh my god, this is insane." And then every weekend for that entire summer, I would call up the buddies and be like, "Hey, do you guys want to play Pokemon Go?" And everyone was like, "Yeah, man." And we'd have one guy driving. The guy in the passenger seat would have two phones, like for the guy driving and for him to catch Pokemon. And I would be sitting in the back seat catching Pokemon too. It was insane. We would just drive around and catch Pokemon, and it was incredible. And I think at that time, I bought some sort of tin. It was like a seasonal tin or something, and it had 4 or 5 packs in it, like they do now. Because the cards that I pulled, I'm not sure exactly what packs were in it, but I know there was an Evolutions pack because I pulled a reverse holo Gyarados from Evolutions, and I was like, that looks a lot like base set Gyarados. And I remember at the time, I went on, it was probably, man, I don't know, it was probably 2015, 2016, so whenever Evolutions came out, 2016, 2017, somewhere around there. And I went online and looked, and I was like, "What is a reverse holo Gyarados cost?" And it must have taken me to TCG Player or some website. And at the time, I think it was like 30 cents or $1 or 50 cents or something like that. It was completely worthless. Not completely worthless, but it was a cool card. It unfortunately just wasn't worth anything. And so I looked at it and I was like, "Oh, these cards, you can't make your money back on these cards." So, and that was like 2016, 2017, like the perfect time to inject myself back into it and really go ham. And I was just like, "Oh, you can't make money on it, bye." And unfortunately, like, yeah, that was it until the pandemic. So between then, though, the collecting continued because I remember going to my dad's with my brother, and my dad at the time had this collection hanging up in the rafters of railroad lanterns. And I remember thinking like, "Oh man, that's super cool." I remember liking to collect things like, we busted out like the sports card collection and stuff where we're looking through it. And I was like, what can I collect now? What am I passionate about that I feel like I could get into that I could collect? And what I landed on was retro video games. So I had never owned, I think my first console we ever owned was a Sega Genesis, if we're not talking about handhelds, the Game Boy. So we weren't a Nintendo family growing up at all. I mean, we went to our friend's house if we wanted to play Nintendo. We did not have Nintendo consoles. We went from Sega to PlayStation to PlayStation 2, and then we went up the Sony tree until Microsoft and Halo 2, and then we went up the Microsoft tree, and we never had Nintendo stuff growing up. So I decided that I was going to buy Nintendo stuff at that time, and I ordered that day. I looked online. I was like, "Oh, I want to get a complete inbox Nintendo NES." So I bought a complete inbox Nintendo NES. I think it was like $90 or $100 or something at the time. Had it shipped to my other place, and it was awesome. I was like, "Holy crap, this is so cool!" And that kind of started me collecting video games. And the video game collecting was super cool. It was at that time that it was before everyone kind of figured out like, "Oh, these are viewed now as collectibles." Everyone just thought they were old games. So I would go to garage sales and stuff, and there would just be like a box with a Super Nintendo and all these Mario Super Nintendo games, and it was $40. Or I'd go to a garage sale, and it would be like a GameCube with games. Or a lot of times I'd go to garage sales and I'd be like, "Hey, you have any video games?" And this guy would come out with a box of, let's say, GameCube and games, and it would have Twilight Princess and the Ocarina of Time, like special edition thing, and the Wind Waker, and all these like Mario parties, like all these first party games for the GameCube. And they would just be like, "Oh, $20, just give me $20." And so it was at that time where I was like, "Man, I could make a lot of money doing this, or I could at least make enough to keep like doubles in my collection, and it was a lot easier to do that with video games than Pokemon cards. There's a lot of Pokemon cards. There's a lot of video games, but it's a lot easier to find like doubles of video games that people had, especially Nintendo. But yeah, eventually I amassed this like gigantic collection. I bought out a store that had gone under. I bought the entire inventory for like $1,200. And it had some games that were worth like $500-$600 just in complete in box condition. And I ended up selling all of it. Still one of my biggest regrets. I ended up selling all of those games it was around $30,000 back in 2016, 2017, something like that. I hate to think how much that collection was worth during the boom, during the pandemic. It was probably insane when all that video game stuff started. It was probably like 100K at least. I would assume it probably 3x because there were some really amazing games like Mint Complete in Box Chrono Trigger, Mint Complete in Box Secret of Mana. Like every like big game for every one of the consoles I owned. Like Black Label, Final Fantasy VII, like literally everything you can think of, I owned either in complete in box or in like mint cartridge. So I sold it all though because I had taken out a lot of student loans and I was still finishing college. Actually, I had just finished college. So when I finished college, it was like, all right, this is what I was using this for, was to pay off student loans. So I sold it all. I think it was like $16,000 or $20,000 I paid towards student loans, which cut my loans basically in half, which was awesome. And then I just didn't have a collection anymore. I didn't have video games. I didn't really collect at all. From then on, it was like, okay, I'm now kind of in the workforce. I'm getting a job. Like I'm trying to make things work career-wise, and so I don't really have a whole lot of extra time to or extra funds to just pour into like a hobby. And then the pandemic happened. I, like many people, went into a sort of depression, I would say. I wasn't liking where I was at in my career. My job sucked. I didn't like it at all. I was criminally underpaid. And during the pandemic, a lot of people were choosing kind of not to work at that time or coming out of the workforce. So a lot of places needed to hire more people. So it was the perfect opportunity for me to look for a different job. And so I found a different job. It was awesome. It paid like 70% increase. It was huge. It was huge boost to my confidence and my mental health at the time and everything. And then Twitch and Pokemon happened. I was a Twitch streamer for a long time. And what happened was Pokemon Week on Twitch with Ludwig and Mizkif and Island Grown and all those guys started Pokemon Week. And there's a lot of bad stuff that came out of Pokemon Week. But the good thing was it brought me back into Pokemon. I got really excited watching all these vintage boxes get opened. And I started to buy cards. And I decided, I was like, I want to buy a booster box and open it. Just whatever booster box. So I looked at the ones that were available. I think it was Darkness Ablaze and Rebel Clash and some of these other ones. And I figure one of my favorite Pokemon's Charizard. Darkness Ablaze has like an $80 Charizard in it. So I decided I would buy a Darkness Ablaze box. And it was so cool. I opened it on stream. Halfway through, we pulled the Charizard out of my first ever box. And it was awesome. It was an amazing experience. And from then on, I was back into Pokemon. I was buying, I was collecting, I was learning. And I really kind of refined what I've decided to do with Pokemon. I started just opening a lot of packs on stream and stuff because I wanted it to be like an experience. And then that sort of like petered out. Twitch for me kind of just stopped. I don't stream on Twitch anymore and haven't for a long time. And I just decided to do YouTube videos. And I was a pack opening channel for the longest time, and I still am sometimes. But I've just decided now that my YouTube is going to be a place where I can just catalog my experiences with this hobby and how my progression through the hobby has gone. So, at the start, it was pack opening. I would spend loads of money on packs. And with the idea of like, oh, that's okay, I'll spend all this money, but if I get a couple hits, I can grade them and make my money back. Don't do that because that doesn't work. You're putting way too much on the randomization. You're gambling way too much doing that. And I kind of transitioned to like buying singles and completing collections and grading and all that stuff. And I do with this similarly to what I did with the video games, and it's something that I'm really passionate about. I basically I will buy doubles of cards, I will grade them, I will sell one to make up the cost of both that I spent raw, and I'll keep the other one graded in my collection. And it's basically like it's with a little bit of work, I'm amassing a collection with almost zero cost apart from time. So for me, to be able to do that again, because the video game market doesn't really allow you to do that anymore. People know what they have. They know that their shit's expensive. Like, it just is what it is at this point. And but Pokemon cards, you could still do that if you put in the time and the effort and you gain the knowledge. You can absolutely still do that. So that's where I'm at now. I'm just enjoying collecting. I'm adding a lot of value to my personal collection. I'm grading, Pokemon, and I'm collecting sealed MetaZoo, and I'm dabbling in sealed video games, and it's just been a lot of fun. And I feel like, it's contributed, as well as the other decisions that I made, to really, bring a positive into my life. Something that gives me a little bit of purpose and a fun hobby to do on the side. So, yeah, I just really appreciate it. And hopefully this has been interesting. Maybe it hasn't, but you got to learn a little bit more about me. And I hope you guys enjoyed the video. We'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.